Hello, hello. We're back again for another Wet Ink Wednesday, and I'm joined tonight by Chris Sellers of Hectic Electron. Chris is a publisher and a designer. We're going to talk about Raccoon Sky Pirates. We're going to talk about some other stuff. So I'm really excited to talk to Chris. Chris, thank you for being on my interview show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think we may have spoken for over like a few years at conventions, maybe a total of 10 minutes so far.
Right.
So I'm very interested to get to know you in this through this interview process.
And
Because
then we had a sort of design mediated discussion online, just in text of
oh
like
yeah, that's
documents
true.
and text on documents. And like I feel like we've actually had kind of a meeting of the minds there, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean that comes into like obviously, yes, like we collaborate. You were invited, or we collaborated together. I don't know how you say it, but
And then you gave me these great draft rules for Garbage and Glory, and I used those. Anyway, we're getting
yeah.
ahead of ourselves, but yeah,
Yeah, we are.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
I like to set
yeah.
up what we're going to talk about, but
Yes,
then not
right.
talk about it and then talk about something else instead. So we should start at the beginning. That's I hear a very good place to start. Um, and so I want to know how you came to be sort of a person who makes games. Like, is it because it can start all the way back as childhood, right? Like I played Mousetrap as a kid and I loved it, and I've been designing games ever since. Like if that's the story, please tell me. But what is your route
Yeah,
into creation of games?
like I've always been temperamentally creative, and always looking for a medium for that. Comics was it for me for a while when I was younger. But my older brother Mike was a game designer and made a living as a game designer, um, mostly in video games, but with a lot of love for tabletop games. And you know, showed me that you could do it. It showed me it was a thing that people actually did, and
I mean, that's like a cheat code to like have a family member who's already doing it. It's just for
right,
what you just said. Like
totally,
this is
yeah.
possible. Like amazing.
Yeah, yeah. He never published his Fantasy Heartbreaker. Like he did work on a lot of higher profile like video games that saw the light of day. But I think, and so then I was like writing adventures, and I wrote a hack book for one of Pelgrim's games. Um, and I didn't write my first full game, and it was just a little zine uh, until uh, raccoons entered our lives. And so that's what tipped me over to actually write a game. And Kickstarter's Zine Quest was actually helpful just in terms of that getting over that hump of, oh God, can I actually do something? Because
Mhm.
they're like, it's just a zine, just make a little thing. Um, and so that got me doing it. And then thing I do, I had to make it more complicated so that it became this box set. Um,
So,
should I,
no, that's
have I told you about when about the inspiration for Raccoon Sky Pirates?
no.
Um,
I think that's I do want to hear about that, but I kind of want to
okay.
ask about some of these other. So you said you hacked
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of
yeah,
like were you said you were dungeon mastering or game mastering
yeah.
and making these games. Like is that was that a like was this a short time period between like or was
So,
this like a long I ran a 10-year
uh, uh,
campaign and then I made my first product, or was it
oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I'll
like
get into it. Yeah, let's get into it. So, like, got Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition at like 12,
Hmm.
and uh, uh, devoured it. Had no idea what most of the rules meant, and started playing it out with friends. Fell out of it until after college, and then at work with work friends, got back into role playing games through Shadowrun and Top Secret of all things, and
think I've heard
started
of
up
that one.
a weekly game where this friend of mine, who's just a game master, just led us through like a 10 or 12 year arc of
Goodness.
this game, meeting weekly for like 8 hours. Um, and and that was this. amazing. I mean, the system was sort of beside the point after a while, but it was this amazing sort of spies with supernatural elements thing that I really hope he writes up into it sometime because his whole sensibility around it is so great. Um, that was the
I mean, it's a
Brimstone
great combo.
campaign, and that was just formative. Yeah,
Lots of, I mean,
yeah,
lots of games. I mean, and tons of media have played with those two elements. It's a great. There's so much there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There really is, and it really got cosmic in the end. It started out really low level, and he just was a master of
Mm,
pacing. Um, and you spend 12 years, you know, weekly doing something like that.
yeah.
It got into my brain. And I was working in video games at the time and being really burned out by all the creative possibilities that weren't there in video games because you're one cog in a big machine.
Hmm.
And so the tabletop role games really sang to me with all this inventive collaborative possibility. Um, and I think I just had the bug from then. So fast forward several years, I tried to get the real life stuff under control, and I was playing and running these awesome games like Dungeon Crawl Classics, really getting into that. So this is recent now, and so I forget when, but some years ago I made a third party adventure for DCC and published that their third party system, and that was really gratifying. And I illustrated it all myself and really got into it.
Nice.
And it's this crazy 20-sided tesseract that you're like wandering through. It's a zero level funnel, which I love those things. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. That's I have yet
so
to
so it, yeah,
experience the zero level funnel, but I have read
so
and
funny.
I've heard I've heard an actual play of one and I've read one and it's like I've not gone through it myself, but it's like such a it's almost like high concept, but not really. Like I like it. I like it as an idea. So
Yeah,
like and then
yeah,
to put one almost meta level in a 20-sided like dimension thing, amazing. That sounds
it's, it's the zero level funnel is so funny, right? Because it's like it's classic dungeon crawl, but
hmm.
sort of there's a level of slapstick to it because
Yeah.
everybody has got four characters, and one of them dies. You're like, oh, I really thought that was the one who was going to make it. Anyway, I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and then you sort of bond with these characters as they go through all this stuff. But so I published that, and and then a little bit later I published this supplement for Pelgrane Press's science fiction space opera game, Ashen Stars, which is a sort of gritty reboot of a Star Trek like world or series. And in that, so it's Pelgrane, and their flagship system is Gumshoe, where
Hmm.
investigative focused game. And so they were using Gumshoe for space opera, where basically forensic investigators and freelance law enforcers in this lawless part of the galaxy, trying to figure out what's going on, and what's behind the little mystery in each game that you play, each scenario, then that can tie into a larger mystery. And so I loved that system. I loved how it. What really baked my noodle with it was how it made it gave everybody something to do on the crew,
Mm.
and had a model for space combat where it wasn't one captain barking orders to people. It was very
Yeah.
collaborative, and
Okay, okay. I was about
yeah,
to say I don't see space opera as like the precursor to Raccoon Shenanigans, but what you just said sounds like this is the precursor to Raccoon Shenanigans.
right. Well, yeah, and then my hack book for Ashen Stars, which is called Rogues Galaxy, is you're not freelance law enforcers, investigators, you're criminals, and you're doing
Mm.
heists. And it's a bit of a harder fit for the investigative stuff, but the investigation becomes, you know, what's really going on in the heist, who's screwing you over, who is in power. I borrowed their 13 icon system from 13th Age. So there's 13 icons of the underworld in the galaxy. And I leaned a lot more on Star Wars than, they sort of leaned on Star Trek as
Yeah.
inspiration. Um, So, and around probably a little before that, Scum and Villainy came out. So I was sort of tilting at that windmill too. And so anyway, that was a lot of fun, but it wasn't a standalone game.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then my first standalone game was and is Raccoon Sky Pirates.
So it sounds like it's sort of a natural evolution, right? It wasn't like a bolt from the blue that's, boom, now I'm
Right.
making a zine. It was like a natural evolution of like playing games and a 12-year campaign is it that's I've had like
So,
not quite 12 years. I mean, we played it maybe for a decade, but not every week, right? We would play for weeks and weeks and weeks and then take a break for months and then come back and play for months and um but yeah, so that's incredible. But then like I'm saying, yeah, it's like a through line, right? It's like you're building up to this like it's been fun to write for these other people's systems, but I want to write my own system. Like that isn't a decision that everyone makes. Is it
mhm.
back to the creative like freedom thing that you were talking about before? Like I have to I have to do it where there are no rules and start with a blank page to get what I want out of the next project, or was it
Yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, I'm just throwing out a possibility, but like,
Mhm.
is it
Yeah.
like that, or was there something else that really drove you to be like, I need to, because there's also like the business responsibilities of like producing the thing yourself, and that's a whole other,
Oh,
a hill
totally.
of beans that you have to worry about. And like some
Mhm.
people, I think, are attracted to that, where like, they're looking at numbers and they're thinking about like the business side first, and then but so anyway, I'm
For
throwing out
me,
possibilities. Where are you?
for me, it's like, I've played so many great games, but I've also played games where even though I'm enjoying it, part of me is already thinking about how I would do it differently.
Hmm.
And or even not about particular games, but after I play it, my mind just my ADHD jackrabbit mind is thinking, okay, that was great, and that makes me think of this and this and this. And
Hmm.
the only way to give voice to any of that, see the light of day, is to write my own adventure and GM it, and then write my own adaptation of this game and put it out there. And like, it's not, you know, until you actually get it printed and put it out there and say it's done, it it's it doesn't really exist. It's just something you might talk about with somebody over
Hmm.
dinner. Um, and I need it to really exist.
Yeah.
Um, Especially I got into this, but before my game designer brother passed away, I was already getting into this, but after he passed away, it was so much more urgent. It was like I need to get stuff out there,
Yeah.
and like uh, uh it has to live.
Yeah. Well, I, yeah, I can definitely see that adding a lot of impetus to it. So so like it did, so is Raccoon Sky Pirates available in like, did it come out as like a zine first and then you later did the box set version that has dice in it and stuff,
Okay,
or is it all like
originally
one line of
originally it was six
production?
pages, which isn't even a thing, right? You have to have a multiple of 4 pages. But it was 6 pages, and I just did it for this group that I play with in town called Street Games Columbus, and they're really great, and they really foster all this creativity, and it's just a great bunch of people. And I put it out for them, and we played it a bit, and that was like November of 2020, and I knew Zine Quest was coming up that February, Zine Quest 3.
Hmm.
Um, so I wrote it out into this bigger thing. Um, and it was just going to be a zine. So I started the Kickstarter, it was like in 2 weeks, and it was just going to be a zine. Uh, and then I like hit my very modest funding goal in 8 hours, and in a kind of bipolar mania, I was like, okay, well, if we hit the stretch goal, there'll be a deck of cards because I thought it needed a deck of cards. Like I was still fine tuning the design after, as I was racing the Kickstarter. And I was
Right.
like, okay, if we get to this goal, which we totally won't, I'll put in a 12-sided die with a raccoon on the 12, because you're always rolling 12-sided dice in that game. Um, and and like before those stretch goals was like I'm adding this to the design and this other thing to the design, things that I wanted to put in.
Yeah.
Um, and because I hadn't put out a full standalone game before, I was quite insecure about the game needs this and this and this. It needs these things or it's no good. But what I and it's a better game for those things I put in. But I probably could have put out just a zine without
Yeah.
all that. But I love making stuff and I love games and I love designing them. And so it was this enormous act of love with no thought for my own time or money, that just said, no, it has to have all this stuff. And I was just full of, like, my heart was full of raccoons. And I put it all out there. And and what I didn't realize, right, because I was like in the Kickstarter, also my first Kickstarter, I was like,
Right, right.
okay, everybody who if we hit these stretch goals for the deck of cards and the die, which we totally won't, everybody who pledged at the physical level to get an actual zine will get those also. What I didn't realize was that I had told them that shipping costs were covered in the pledge that they made,
Hmm.
this $8 pledge,
Yeah,
and or something like $8. So like,
sure.
I had just tipped by adding the deck and the die, which we did hit very quickly. I had gone from envelope mailing to box mailing, package mailing,
Yeah.
and it was totally worth it. It was totally great. But so sort of a long-winded answer to your question of like, it did kind of start just as a zine, but also before the Kickstarter, before the 2 weeks were over, it was a much bigger game already.
Yeah,
Then I
yeah.
did some more play testing after the Kickstarter, and it took me several months to get everything together and get all the components and fulfill it.
What it all, I mean, for as like chaotic and like riding flying the airplane while you're building the airplane as this process sounds,
Yes,
uh it almost sounds like it's almost the best way for it to have happened in
I
some
know,
respects
right? It's so
because
raccoon.
well, it is so raccoon. I didn't mean that. I just meant that like you're on this sort of like you're like, oh, I'll just put it out there, and then like, oh, but then it really I would like these things to be in it. And then so you set a number for that, which may not have been rigorously researced or whatever about whether or
Sure,
not you were
right.
going to make your
Yes.
cost or
Oh
whatever.
gosh,
But
yeah.
but like you just put out a number as a stretch goal, and then
Right.
the flow of funds in from the pledges or whatever are like getting you up to that goal. There's like a buoying feeling, I'm sure, throughout the process of there's
Hmm.
yes, it does sound like very it's almost like yes, fit to the theme. The design is it's all the same thing, the design and
Yeah.
the funding and the process. But really it's like that I really like the when you I'm thinking about my own first Kickstarter, right? Because I had like you, I had some credits in the industry. I had some things that I'd published for like quote unquote real companies before we did our first game. But there definitely was like a list of things that were like, no, this has to be in the book. Like you've got to write
Hmm.
falling damage and a fire damage and a like gun damage and a like blood, this much blood leaks at this much time, poison, different rules for poison, making your own poison. Like we did all that stuff in our first game because like it felt like it quote unquote needed to be there to be a game, and
Right.
we did produce
Right.
dice, because you want to have branded dice to go with your stuff, and there's a lot of things that in our second and third and fourth games, we haven't done we haven't felt the need to produce all of those things that way. We've done it a different way and we've kind of found our style or our what we're wanting to do, right? But that pressure of like I know I've seen a game before. It looks like this, so I have to put that together,
Yeah, right, right,
is
totally. Yeah.
is is definitely a thing that I felt in our first crowdfunding. So
Hmm. Hmm.
uh so it can you give us a pitch for the game in general, like Raccoon Sky Pirates? I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
in the name. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
all in the name, right?
It
But
is.
uh
Yeah.
but like what are some of the mechanics? You got cards, you got a D12, what is it? You mentioned
So
heists already, so like it's all there, but
yeah.
like put it all together. What is the
So it's
game?
It's a GM-less story game with a lot of board game elements to keep you on track. You all play raccoons. You make your characters very quickly at the beginning. Each one is on a half letter sheet. Every raccoon has their own list of 12 things they might do. So the central mechanic is you roll to see what you're going to do.
Mm.
Um, and then you have your own list of 12 things. And depending on choices you make before roll, what you roll might be helpful or unhelpful. And if it's helpful, fine, you do what you get to narrate what you were doing based on what you thought you might do, what your role actually said, and that was helpful, and whatever else had already added to the story. If it's unhelpful, then the problem track mounts up, and there's a problem track in the house, and when that maxes out, the residents discover you and chase you out with a broom. But there's also a problem track on the ship, and when that maxes out, your ship blows up, and you cut to the last scene. So I'm skipping a bit here, but so like you make your raccoons, you make your ship, which is also very quick, and decide what makes it float. And then you go through a series of scenes, flying to the house, getting inside the house, and inside the house where you're stealing everything you can before the lights come on. And then the last scene where you fly back laden down with all your junk and try to make it back home to your junkyard home without exploding. Things keep wrong because you're raccoons.
Right, right. I I like I mean yeah, it's again, it sounds so, that sort of, I mean, it's a little bit true, but it's also a little bit sort of created by pop culture, this image of the chaos gremlin nature of the
Mm-hmm,
raccoon.
mm-hmm.
It's very much fun to play with that. They're, I mean, whatever. We don't need to get into like real raccoon, biology or whatever. Like that's like
They're amazing animals. Yeah, but like I saw like a TikTok recently saying, "Oh, you want to adopt a raccoon, a little baby raccoon," and then smash cuts to the adult raccoon that this person brought into their house. And it's just a panning of all the broken bowls and dishes in the kitchen until you
yeah.
get to this cabinet where you just see the raccoon reaching in for the last bowl.
Uh-huh.
And I saw that and I was like, I nerfed the raccoons. I didn't make them chaotic enough. Like,
Yeah. I mean, and I've had it was a camping trip. There was some s'mores stuff. The raccoons made a raid and
oh my God.
walked off with the box of graham crackers. I mean, it was, but again, this is like campground. They were expecting it, I guess. It, the real raccoons are remarkable creatures, but they're not necessarily, big, whatever. Their behavior is sort of because they run up against our behavior, I think a lot of times.
Mm,
Anyway, again,
hmm
this isn't a biology
hmm
podcast, but like we're going to go with the pop culture version. So like you've hit the nail on the head. I love that idea of like the you're going to do, you don't know what you're kind of surrendering to, like the die roll and like what happens, and then that is going to create the narrative. I mean, obviously I'm thinking of things like Honey Heist and Fiasco and stuff like
hmm
that are very much that kind of thing, and that is the game, is to accept that kind of chaos and go with that. Is that Was that a design space that you were really interested in exploring because you had done sort of like the more crunchier, shadow years of Shadowrun and like really intense investigation, and you're just sort of like, I don't know, roll a dice, see what happens. Like, is it
Yeah.
is it like
Well,
freeing in a way to like just really go into that style of gameplay, and then almost like a palate cleanser, right? And that you're like, I've gotten off of this campaign. It's been very organized. I need to do something that is not at all organized, and then obviously you had to organize it as a rules sort of thing, but like to that gameplay style is so different from some of the other games that we were talking about earlier.
oh yeah. I had become really enamored of GMless games after playing some Sleepaway and um, Wander Home
Mhm.
and I don't know if Wander Home was out yet then, but like other things like Dream Askew, and really loved the democratization of the storytelling authority at the table.
Mm.
And so I thought I'll do something like that. And I don't know how I decided the that you would roll to see what you do, but I think it was a lot like what you say, where after all these games that were doing it one way, I wanted to flip it and do it a totally different way, and in the playtest, the chaos that that caused just seemed very appropriate.
Yeah.
Um, and then it became a really difficult to stick to because both of those things, GMless and rolling to see what you do, was like uh, it was what set the game apart, and it was what uh, people who heard about it would talk about was the roll to see what you do. And then I was like, yeah, but in the test, it was starting to show difficulties, and I hammered it together, but it was touch and go there for a while. I was talking to Avery Alder, who was
Mm.
very graciously um, giving me some advice, and was thinking, oh, maybe I should just ditch this. And she's like, no, you said it's all to see what you do. Like that's the whole game.
Yeah.
So I stuck to it. I'm glad I did because it is unlike uh, almost everything else that I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to tell me numbers or anything like that, but it seems like it's a presence, right? I mean, you've been to Origins is where I've
Yeah.
seen you. You've got a booth there, like you're selling Raccoon Sky Pirates. Like I see it on, the front page of Indie Press Revolution. I mean, it's frequently there. If you're not at a show, it's at Indie Press Revolution's table. So like there seems to be an ongoing success of the game. I mean, I think again, again, you don't have to tell me numbers or anything like that, but is it a success? I mean, is it
Yeah. No, it's been
continues to
really
be?
yes. Yeah. Yeah. I feel really lucky to have hit on something that really resonates with people as much as this has. But yeah, no, it's sold more than I ever thought it would. I mean, it's actually at the end of its print life, so it's still going to be available as a PDF on itch, through Indie Press Revolution, and on my site. Um, but uh, I have to put I have to put an end to turning my house into a warehouse and
Mm,
assembling raccoons every day. Um, or actually, I've recently gotten help from a friend to do that. Like I kind of want to put a punctuation mark at the end of this one so that I can work on the next version of Raccoon Sky Pirates. But I
mm.
really feel very lucky how well it's done. Uh, I, I think I haven't broken it down between print and PDF, but it's sold like 7,000 copies,
I
and
mean, that's a
in
lot of
our industry,
copies.
that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
As
um,
for an indie game,
yeah.
that's
Right.
notable. Yeah, that's great. Uh,
And I mean, right, it's not like quit your day job money. Uh,
sure.
Although I did quit my day job for a little bit, but that's unrelated. Yeah, no, but it's like, no, like you say, it's a presence. It's been a top three seller in Indie Press Revolution,
Yeah.
like consistently for years now. And you know what they said to me was that often an indie game doesn't really start to get traction until until after the designer has stopped making it. Like
Mm.
it takes a while to filter out into everybody's consciousness, people to hear about it. Especially with me because I'm just terrible at marketing my games. I'm trying to get better. I'm getting better. I shouldn't say I'm sure. I'm getting better. But like, and I'm sure this is something you know all about, is like the actual banging the drum side of the business. Um,
It-
uh, uh,
it-
uh,
that's
that
a
like
whole
people are
job
still, yeah,
that's a whole
yeah,
job sometimes.
yeah. Oh, totally. And like there are still so many people who haven't heard of Raccoon Sky Pirates, but I'm very fortunate in that as soon as they hear the name, that draws them in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's at a relatively low price point for its components, and so that helps. Like it's a sort of no-brainer impulse purchase, and then they have a lot of fun with it. So that's been, whew, I just feel very lucky, and I don't expect to do these numbers again. I hope I do,
Yeah.
but like you guys are already operating, I think, at a bit of a higher level. I mean, you've got people working for
I
weddings,
mean,
right? Like.
we don't have anyone on staff other than the two of us. We don't have
Okay.
employees. Like we've never issued a W-2 to anybody,
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I think
And we don't
that's sort of like my level. Like in my mind, that's like when you stop being an indie publisher, when you get to the level that you've got like employees that are,
uh-huh.
not the co-creators, not the co-founders, Um,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
so
Uh-huh.
we're not at that level. We're not at that level.
But you've
Uh,
made some really high profile games. You guys
we
did Jiangshi, right?
we did co-produce that one a few years ago. We've got we've signed we have signed some games and put out some games with known industry names. I think we pretty quickly transitioned from game designers to game publishers. Like it is kind of wearing both hats. But I think for whatever reason, Brandon and I working together, like it just was like we wanted to do things sort of faster than we could do it ourselves. And so then it was natural to be like, well, we've got to get some more people in. And then once you start hiring, not, freelancing, on freelance basis, once you start doing that, then people are like, oh, you're taking work here. I've got a game. And you're like, well, that is a good game. Sure. I mean, there's nothing different about you publishing or us publishing that than the one we wrote ourselves. It's the same business side. So then now we're mainly publishers, and that was
Mm.
sort of a series of decisions that we made that put us in that position. And yeah, we it is sort of like the two roads diverged in the woods kind of a situation where it's like we could have stayed writing all the games ourselves and doing it one particular way, but we wanted to grow quickly, and you can't write 4 games a year. I don't know that anyway, yeah. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
different decisions, were made by
Yeah.
Brandon and I at similar time periods. I think we were already, you said 2020. I think in 2020, we were already crowdfunding. 2020, I think we had 2 or 3. I think we ran 3 crowdfundings in 2020, to get into the Weird and Wild, into print, and we did the one for the
Mm.
original Zhongshi ran, and then we ran one that didn't succeed in 2020. So, you know, we'd already
Oh,
been doing
cool. I mean,
we'd been
sorry,
doing it a
hard, but
few
interesting.
years. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Hmm.
mean well, I mean, we blame. I mean, this is like we're way off this my
I'm
script
sorry, we're way
for
off
the notes.
topic, but
No,
I'm
but
so
it's
interested in
fine.
this stuff. Yeah.
Well, it was our only attempt to do a 5e product. We thought it
Mm.
was a slam dunk, but I think it was based on our friends, local to us, Eric Bloat. He has a game called Dark Places and Demogorgons, which he did. The reason why he put the Demogorgons there is because Stranger Things. It's like a
Mhm.
very 80s OSR sort of game, and a number of people had asked him for a 5e version of it. So then like we were bringing our art pool, and having artists do cool art for it, and we had some people writing some plussed up rules for 5e to make it like teens. Well, I'd say they were plussed down rules where it was like
Mm.
you would like level up to like level 10, but then that's really like level 5 of like a real
Huh.
5e character, whatever. We were doing a bunch
Yeah.
of stuff. We did some adventures. There was lots of stuff that was being produced, but then nobody backed it. Not nobody, but like we didn't it,
Didn't
it
hit the
wasn't
target.
it
Yeah.
wasn't either enough people. We weren't doing enough things that were different for 5e players to come in, and then the people who already liked the property didn't want 5e because Dark Places and Demogorgons is an OSR thing. So like whatever. Also, there was a lot of other things were happening in October and November of 2020 that were taking up a lot of bandwidth on everyone's mind. So
I
like
bet. Yeah. I vaguely
uh,
remember.
yeah. So anyway, we blame the election a little bit and the media coverage that's that you couldn't buy ads in that time period because they were
Mm.
all already bought, or ads
Right.
spend, whatever. There was a lot of issues that
Yeah.
happened in 2020
Right.
with the crowd with the but the ones we'd done earlier in the year were great. The we had a very successful 2020 overall.
Right
Because we
on.
had two very
Great.
large crowdfunding campaigns in that year. And then those books came out in 2021. And, so anyway, that's,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I
Sorry.
want to
I
ask
asked. I was
you,
really curious, but
yeah,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's fine. We could talk more about it at some other time. I do want to So talking about my own stuff, this is how we ultimately get connected, right? Because you and Raccoon Sky Pirates are a known entity, and then we're doing another game. Another local to your area, Sam Brick, had these, and I don't know if you know this story, but the Sam Brick's an artist. We met him at Gen Con, or not at Gen Con, at Origins Game Fair, and he had these stickers, and the stickers showed these raccoons with like homemade weaponry and armor, and it was like a guy with a colander on his head and a metal ruler, and you could see the inch marks on the ruler, but there was a little hilt, and it was a raccoon with a sword. Um, and we saw this guy, and we're like, Sam, we don't know anything about you, but what is this? This is amazing. Is this like based on a game or whatever? And he's like, no, I just thought it'd be funny to draw raccoon adventurers. And we're like, can we license this art and make a game of it and then commission you to draw a bunch more in the same style? And he's like, please, please do. And so that was the start of this, that the Garbage and Glory project,
Yeah.
came out of his, and that's not that's how Brandon and I like to work sometimes, is we'll see some art and we'll be like, this is evocative art, what game goes with this art? And so we've been, for years now, literally almost for like a year and 2 year, 2.5 years, 2 years and a little bit of time, try to catch up to like this initial like idea of like the art that already existed. um but that's why we were like, well, we got to get the people who've already worked with raccoons in on this project, right? We've got our core team that have worked with our system before. We got to get in the other people like Chris and the people who did Bridget and Dustin, who did the psychic trash
Oh
detectives.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like there's someone else who's worked on Garbage and Glory, and I'm hoping to interview them next in this series. um, so, I mean, it was sort of from us, it was like, look, Chris, you're known for Raccoon Sky Pirates. You've got to do some aerial shenanigans stuff. And I was thinking about it earlier today. I was writing my questions where I was like, I, it's like this sort of, I, I've been talking to a lot of designers recently. I know I've talked so much in the last few minutes. But I'm much more of like I'm not really a numbers designer. Like I can make a stat block
Mm.
and whatever, but balancing it is more of like feelings than it is like actual mathematical numbers. Somebody sent me, this is not a slam against them, but they sent me like the spreadsheet and like all of their like ratios of how likely things were to happen or whatever. And I'm like, I I don't, this is not how I design things.
Your
This,
brain's fly off of that, right?
yeah, it's
Like,
like I don't think of it that way. So
good thing somebody's thinking about it, but like,
well,
yeah, that
exactly.
and
And
it's really the machinery under the hood, right? You don't present players or readers with a spreadsheet, but like, yeah.
I mean, for some designers, that is how they think about it. Like, how
Hmm.
likely is this to occur? Let me actually crunch the numbers with these variables and see how likely this is actually to occur, because they want to assign, they want to match rarity to power for a system of magic and stuff like that. And that makes total sense. But I don't tend to think of that way. So I was thinking of like the this is a huge setup that maybe was unnecessary, but what I was trying to get to was the idea of like, so I sent you the rules for Garbage and Glory, the in progress rules, and like we checked in. And so like then what you sent back to me was this sort of like lovely mirror image version where it was like you didn't rename the skills or
Yeah.
anything like that, but you were like, okay, so here's like, you asked me to like take your rule set and then do some of my like taking my experience with having made Raccoon Sky Pirates, but like what would Sky Pirates like that work within your system? And so you did this like lovely rule set that is like a very complete, like it's almost a game all by itself, that marries the rules as the skill rolls that the plus one system uses with like, but this is all applied to like the airship and the trash and the four card suits and all the stuff that's part of the plus one system. You just took all that and
Yeah.
just like you renamed it, and it's just like this. I don't know. It's probably too grandiose to call it like this loving reflection, but like you made
No,
this
but it,
amazing thing that is
yeah.
like, this was my thing, but then you've made it your thing, and it fits perfectly. Um,
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. So So my brother's whole vibe was pirates.
Mm,
He could sail a boat. He loved the age of the Spanish Main, all that stuff. And so we used to talk about, okay, what if you had a card game that was about pirate ships? What would the
mm,
stats for this ships be, and how would that be reflected in the cards? So I was already thinking like that.
yeah.
And then when I read the plus one system, um, especially in the context of Garbage and Glory, it was really interesting to see what the different suits represented. And so that just got my brain going to where, because, I also love those things where the ship is a character, where the ship has stats that are analogous to ones that the characters have. Um, and making those stats something that everybody could draw from made the ship a kind of collaborative space, a little stage where everybody can use the things that it offers and the scene offers. So it was especially given those rules of garbage and glory, it was just also a really interesting kind of not mathematical, but sort of analytical puzzle of like, okay, how do I take this really not mathematically balanced? They're really, really random, encouraging game, Raccoon Sky Pirates, and what would that look like if it were a garbage and glory game? And
Yeah.
so I got to indulge in some of those more, uh, uh, you know, just more like how most games actually work kind of vibe, like you are choosing what you want to do and you roll to see if you succeed. And so it was actually kind of a breath of fresh air for me after all the chaos back in
Yeah.
Sky Pirates, like and then I got to give the ship stats that were based on cards, and the cards are still garbage that you're building your ship with, so it gets iron and sails and flag. And it was a lot of fun trying to boil down what those three attributes were going to be that then everybody could use to affect their roles using their own skills, but using shipboard skills.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of fun to like, I mean, really a lot like what you say, like to sort of lovingly take the garbage and glory rules and kind of cast them into a new arena, which is the sky.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really satisfying, very gratifying.
Yeah, well, and I'm so excited for the book to get out there. The main game is not yet done as the time of the recording, and so like, but then the stretch goals will follow after that. So like there'll be some time,
Mhm.
but it is so it's such a cohesive rule set. Like, and I think
Thank you.
the and this I think one of the things that going again, I like to set up what I'm going to talk about next, but I'm still talking about this thing like that. Oftentimes people send me an adventure or they send some stuff and I have notes about it. And I think for you, it was like because you made this very clean, tight package where it was like there's no notes because like it's all you did it there's no loose ends to complain about. Like you tucked
Oh,
everything
thanks.
in, it's just a complete little design of like here's a system that uses the plus one system to make an airship, and it's raccoon themed and garbage themed and all the things that we wanted. And there was no there was no critiquing a system that was done as you presented it to us. So it was great, and I'm so excited for people to use that when they go out there. And I'll tell you, there's an adventure that somebody else wrote that's like, oh, this is the perfect adventure to have an airship in. So like those will
Yes.
probably be put
So
together
cool.
in the core book. So
That sounds
or not in the
great.
core book, in the
Yeah.
supplement, in the stretch goal
Hmm.
supplement, right? They'll be,
Hmm.
you know, pairs well with this other adventure, so it's a well, I don't know. I'll tell you, well, I'll tell everybody, like it's called Pie Hard, and it is about rating the where you see some C-suites up at the top of the building. There's this buffet, a legendary buffet at the top of a building, and you have to go up to the top of the building to get delicious thing. And then, of course, you have to escape from the building as well,
Sure.
which is where you, if you had an airship, it'd be amazing. You just,
Right?
anyway, um,
I could see the, yeah. So you're not like stopping burglars at Nakatomi Plaza. You're
mhm.
like, you are the burglars.
You are the
Um,
burglars. You are there to
yes,
raid the buffet that is
the
spread out.
buffet, the
Yes,
legendary buffet. That's
the
so
legendary
great.
buffet.
Pie
Yes,
hard. Oh,
pie hard.
awesome.
Yes. Yeah, that's Doug Lewandowski's adventure was that one. So it'll the having an airship would be great. Um, I mean, I don't know that there's a ton more to say about the Garbage and Glory thing, but if you have anything else you want to say about it, I mean, we're here to mostly like kind of
I
officially
mean,
talk about that, so we haven't said that much
yeah,
about it. But
yeah.
like, if you want to talk about it, if there's anything else you want to say, I don't want to, I think it's great. I think you did a great job. I think people will really like
Thank
the
you.
rules, and that sort of iteration on the theme of the garbage and building stuff. But
Well,
I
it
don't
was
know.
fun to it was fun to make secondary attributes that were based on the primary
Mm,
ones. So like your iron was all the garbage your ship was made of, but also its hit points and its size. So like you could make a ship as small as an easy chair or as big as a school bus. It just
right.
depends how many club and spade cards you put down. And your stat is not the ranks on the cards, it's the number of cards in the pile. And you just keep these three piles. So there's something very tangible, tactile
Hmm,
about it.
hmm.
Whereas your ship takes damage, you're discarding cards from that pile, that from the iron pile. And when those are out, so it was like iron was your hit points and well, they're all your hit points, but iron was how big your ship is, and then sail also determines your max speed. So as you lose sail cards, your max speed goes down. Um, and then flag was your max altitude. And as you lose those cards, your ship is getting closer to crashing. So that was fun to try to like uh, make stats and little loops that would actually account for the kinds of things you expect to happen
Yeah,
in an aerial adventure.
yeah.
And because in this game the GM is rolling too and has cards for the NPCs, you could get into these dogfights. Um, so I was just really excited to see that, and I can't wait for people to read it and to uh, um, and hopefully write adventures set in that
Yeah,
arena.
right. It'll be great. It'll be great. Uh, all right. We've talked longer than I was telling you about third and third. We've gone almost the whole time talking about we talked a lot about raccoons. And that's not a bad thing. But I do want to talk to you about yeah, I mean it's not a secret, right? I mean the
No,
Defy the
no,
Gods is
no.
like you've been promoting it, right? It's so like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In
um
my way. Yeah.
well, I mean, it was you had like a sample at
Yeah,
Origins,
beta document out
and
there.
I,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there was somebody who I knew that I was like, oh, this is perfect. I got to go tell him about this game, and he was like, oh yeah, I've already play tested that game. Like so, like
Oh, great.
that was not a new contact, but it was like that was a somebody who, um, however you're promoting it, like that person that I knew would like this game did in fact like it and had already played it at a play test. So it
That's
was
fantastic.
uh, uh, so I to boil it down too quickly, like this is like very high level. You can add some more details, please. But like the Defy the Gods is like it's a PBTA hack, um,
Hmm.
and it is like a sword and sorcery world. Like it is you're going to go defy the gods in like a
Hmm.
Greek tragic hero kind of way. And, maybe you'll mess up some stuff along the way, or you'll get messed up by your hubris or whatever. I mean, it's very
Hmm.
Greek
Hmm.
tragedy, but it isn't necessarily, you're not necessarily doomed. There's sort of this like, in a way that I haven't encountered before. It seems like there's sort of like a suggestion to the game that it's like, or maybe we don't have to fight so much, like
Hmm.
it's a dangerous sword and sorcery style world, but it also kind of encourages you to like, maybe it's not, like I don't know. You don't. is that me reading into it or what?
Well, no, no, I think you're right. I think so. The upshot, so the high level view is it's a queer sword and sorcery adventure romance. Um, the characters are so it's heavily influenced by Ray Najati's Apocalypse Keys. Um, so it's powered by the apocalypse, as you said, where you're rolling 2d6 and adding your stat. But like in game, you can roll a miss, you can roll a success, and you can roll too much success. You roll too
Mm,
high, you get more than you bargained for, and it can be a kind of monkey's paw kind of thing, but it's also very often very metal. Like that, it's turned out to be very sword and sorcery, where you get more than you bargained for, and this thing way out of hand happens. So you don't always want to roll high. Well, you want to roll high, just not too high.
yeah.
Um, it is powered by the apocalypse in that there are playbooks that you play, and each one has their own uh, kind of character that you would expect from sword and sorcery in it, like the sword fighter, warrior, the sorcerer. So you've got the sword and the sorcery right there. The mischievous sailor, the uh, uh, person with a really intimate relationship with a god, um, the person who's raised by wolves, and the person who clawed their way out of the underworld and is alive again.
Mm,
And it's queer in that a lot of these are queer archetypes or archetypes of my idea of queer life. And it's also queer in that there is a whole romance mechanic pulled very much from Thirsty Legends, where you are um, winning people's hearts and giving them your heart and influencing them with those hearts. Um, so, so yeah, there is a lot of combat and fighting, and there's also all this like flirting and seduction, and um, all of it is on a stage where you're constantly being threatened by the gods and by the city rulers, and then you're in this sort of perilous world with gigantic animals and the legacy of lost Atlantis that wants to live again. And the underworld that's just sort of waiting there all the time to
mm,
swallow you up and kind of makes a mockery of your human relationships by killing the people you love.
mm.
So there's a strong holding environment where the first thing you do after you like while you're in the middle of making your characters is you define this pantheon of gods and you define what Atlantis was like in broad strokes, to fill in as you play. Um, and the whole idea is that these gods and the city rulers are gunning for you in a very sort of Clash of the Titans kind of way, like
There's a
with
chessboard
some.
scene somewhere,
There's a what? Oh, yes,
a
exactly.
chessboard.
Totally. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
playing
yeah,
the chessboard
yeah,
in Clash
exactly.
of Titans.
Right, right. Yeah, it's setting up the little figurines. And I try to draw material culture from like Sumer and Babylon and places like that. Um, uh, just to try to give it some a feeling of place. But it's just a very Mediterranean dawn of writing, Fertile Crescent kind of world. And despite all the powers that your characters have, they're basically uh, uh, living upstairs from somebody's coffee shop. They're 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 in a hard way, and
Yeah,
and everything is very tenuous and touch and go, and uh, um, these forces are sort of gunning for you right from the beginning.
yeah. I like everything about what you said. Like everything that you said is it's such a dynamic uh game world. And I mean I should be like you sent out an alpha version or maybe it was a
Mhm,
beta, but like
mhm.
did anyone want to read this? And so that's how I know everything that you just said is yes, I read all that and I liked all of that about it. Like that very it is, yeah, I mean it's great. It's such a dynamic thing, and the twists that you've put on some of the games you references I haven't played, so like maybe you're pulling more than inventing, but it still you've combined it together in this way that I haven't encountered before with the interrelationships between the people and the sort of like, the exact way that you've got the over success, that is not an element in most of the PBTA games that I've played. The highest success is great, but yeah, it's I don't know, it's such a good idea and it's so well realized. Again, like I think your writing is just like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like there's no faults. I find nothing
Oh,
wrong with
thank
what I
you.
read.
You're
You've put
thank
out
you
these
very much.
documents which are like I read them and I'm like I have no notes other than like sounds great. Like sign me up for the play test, find me up for the Kickstarter. It sounds like a great game. So I mean, and I'm sure there's like the word mines. You have to go to the word mines to get to this point.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I'm sure it is not effortless, but it the product looks so clean at the end that it seems to be
Well,
effortless.
I mean, and that's our job, right? Is to make it look effortless, um, and to sweat away at it until it does.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm writing up the manuscript now, like the fuller thing with all the commentary
Hmm.
on the moves and stuff. Um, the eventual arc of these characters is to become monsters themselves.
Mm.
So that's
Mm.
also from Apocalypse Keys, where like uh, you're trying to overthrow these powers, but the risk is you might become one of them.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that in there too. That's sort of like that's kind of hanging over everybody is their doom.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something that we've played with a little bit in Never Going Home, where it's like you want to
Mm,
accept the power that is available in this horrific
mhm.
setting, but like, you might outlive your humanity in the process, like
Totally. Yeah.
it just makes the world even more dramatic where you've got these sort of like, you know, I mean, like, what does it mean to be a demigod, right? When you're like, are you more God than man, or whatever, or
And
human?
there's sort of like King Conan has this,
Hmm. Hmm.
well, with King Conan was such a Mary Sue for Robert E. Howard, but like there's always this sense that he has this destiny ahead of him, um, and I wanted to make that more problematic. I wanted chaos to be the hero, and the people who use chaos and find new ways of being in chaotic ways to be the heroes, all these
Mm.
sort of forces of order to be oppressive. And so becoming more powerful yourself, a warrior who becomes a conqueror or a sorcerer who becomes a master mage. I wanted that to come at the cost of your humanity. And so
Yeah,
all these
yeah,
hearts that you're gathering, those relationships are in danger from your progression. And I
yeah,
also had fun putting a lot of OSR kind of things in it. It's
yeah.
hard to make a game like this without bringing in some OSR stuff. But I think where PBTA has pick lists and OSR has random roll tables and like they meet together, I think in this lovely peanut butter and chocolate way.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. It's great. Uh,
Thanks.
so I'm very excited for it. I think it's so, like I said, it's so your voice was very strong in the manuscript when I was reading it. I was like, oh, this is someone who has this is someone who has something to say, in the way that you talked about, because here we are like two very pale people in North America, and I mean, I think that's part of what you did well was like you kind of acknowledge that like I'm not from the ancient world in this
Mhm.
way, but I think you wrote about it in a very respectful way. And obviously, I'm not. I guess need to get a Sumerian on here to really judge it. But like,
Well, I mean, Sumer is in modern day Iraq, so like, uh, uh, I've been looking
but
for
there's been a very
and looking,
long history
yeah,
in
yeah,
between.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
exactly the
sure.
same culture, but sure.
But what's fascinating to me when I read Sword and Sorcery is, with the exception of a bunch of new stuff that is swimming upstream against this, but like there's such Sword and Sorcery seems to be the place where you can edit it all out if this is too much time. But Sword and Sorcery seems to be the place where the most regressive
Mm.
worn out ideas about gender and civilization and order and sexuality and women and the West and the East sort of go to shrivel up and fester with each other. And
I mean,
it's like,
that's
you
a
know,
that's an apt analysis. I mean, it is very much that way, I think.
well, it's like when Dark Horse had the Conan property in comics, and they go to make their own characters. They make up the most like, oh my God, why would you make a woman who's been through all that shit and she's supposed to be like, this anti-hero rival to Conan? Like, oh my God, why did you narrate all that? Why did I have to read it? Uh, uh, and like, well, the writer was trying to channel Robert E. Howard, and then all this
Yeah.
shit comes out.
Hmm.
And then when Marvel had the license, they had King Conan come to an island where a princess was being held captive by monstrous forces, and oh my God, it's Pocahontas. And like they actually gave her feathers and used her real name, and had no idea that this would be massively offensive to people. And she's in a
Yeah.
metal bikini. Why? Why? So when I love sword and sorcery, but when I went to do it, I was very conscious of this whole weird legacy
Hmm.
and the tendency it has to just come out with this stuff. So I wanted to very much break down the Orientalism,
Yeah.
this bizarrely persistent idea that the West has about the so-called East, which is just everything else,
Hmm. Hmm.
really resilient, horrible ideas. And I wanted to break that down. And of course, misogyny and transphobia and queerphobia and racism, and break those down too,
Yeah.
and really try to make it a story where and I owe a lot to Lila Fujiwara, who's did developmental editing for this, for helping me with this, where like your city isn't weird, it's home. The
Hmm.
people, all these, it's Mediterranean, so everybody's black and brown and olive and like, but I don't even get into that. Like it's just like I just tried to say these are just the people in the city.
Yeah.
Um, and like, so yeah, I also got great sensitivity, cultural consulting from um, Omar Ramadan Santiago. And so they've just really helped my pasty white ass write a rate that is not exoticizing any of this shit,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
while still putting it in a place and time that is not medieval Western Europe.
Yeah.
Like, because I just was so over that. So I'm really trying to make it feel very, very Mediterranean, very, you know, Clash of the Titans, Bronze Age or early. I don't even like to say Bronze Age, but you know what I mean, like that
Right.
kind of
Right. That
time.
that sort
Yeah,
of heroic,
yeah,
Mycenaean
yeah,
ish era. Like
yeah.
this was happening off the Iliad is happening over there, but this is
Right, right,
happening down
right,
here.
right, right.
Like it's
Totally.
that same
While
sort
still
of.
having that noir, hard-bitten city life kind of thing that Sword and
Mhm.
Sorcery does so well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, it's a fabulous idea, fabulous execution.
thank you.
Congrats to you and all your collaborators. So, it is, I'm very excited for it. So I have to ask, so like, how close to being like out there is this? Like you're talking about, is it going to be, you, you don't have to answer. You say like, oh, it'll be ready when it's ready, because like
You
things taking
know,
as long as they take is totally a thing. And
I, I just, I, I, I need it to be done. I need it to be
mm,
out there.
mm,
I put out a flyer that was at Origins that had the QR code to the beta that said coming out in 2024. And I really thought I was going to hit that. But I know that there's also this like uh, real dip for Kickstarter between like September and
yeah, I
December,
mean, if it's like it's like if you October, November can be okay, but
October, right?
if you don't get it out there by October, you probably should wait till February.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah,
I'm
it
waiting to
is.
January, February, and not waiting. That's the time. Because I did what's deadly for game publishing, which is I got a day job,
Mm,
and so like that slowed me down a lot.
well, I mean,
I had this glorious several months where this was all, games was all I was doing,
yeah,
but like, I had to,
needs must,
yeah,
needs
yeah,
must.
yeah, right, exactly. So, which is great. I'm happy, but the so now I'm shooting for like January or February. And
Right.
I'm in the slog right now of filling out the book with all this sort of you know, supplemental like guidance that you need for
Yeah.
a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so
And I'm
I
talking to artists. Oh my God, they're so good. Sorry, please go on.
no, no, I want to hear about the art. Like the cover is great, and like it's so again, it I think it hits on all the things that you've already talked about. Like so, I'm excited to see more of the same in the book. Like that would be something to look forward to.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. It's
so
really beautiful. Yeah.
um, so I do have like one. Obviously this is you're very passionate about this project and you can hear it in or I feel I can hear it in how you've described it and it again it's so different from chaos chaos raccoons like is there a is it just the like every project? This is a theory that there's a podcast I listen to about movies, and they say every movie is a director's response to their last movie, and so
Mhm.
is that a case here where you're like, okay, I did Chaos for years, and that's done, and it's out there now, and like now I need to do something that is more of this like it's in some ways like just as chaotic because you talked about the city powers and the underworld powers and the legacy of Atlantis and the gods are involved and but in some ways it's a designing that is a much more organized process because you're not going to roll to find out what happens. You're going to roll to find out, how bad it is because you've already decided what you're trying to do. It's a totally different design process that you're using. Like or a rule set. I mean, not a design process, but a
Mhm,
rule
mhm,
set,
mhm.
like is it just is it just a natural flow response to the raccoons, or is there something else that like no, like really the thing that unites all of my work is this thing, like
It's no, no, I think you're right. I think it's very much a reaction where it's like, okay, I did the sort of very free form storytelling that's in Raccoon Sky Pirates, and also the like almost board game like constraints that you have to have on that storytelling if you're playing a GM-less game, you know.
mm,
Um, and so I was I went through so many base mechanics for this. It was ridiculous before I finally was like, no, this is really powered by the apocalypse, and that's what I wanted. It's also kind of a lot of us have a fantasy heartbreaker in us,
hmm
and this is sort of the end result of me trying to make mine.
yeah,
Um, where it's not a D&D clone, which I think was the original meaning of Fantasy Heartbreaker. Like it was heartbreaking because people had grand ideas and just ends up being D&D, but it is sort of the heartbreaker in the sense of like, oh, it's this enormous game, they'll never get it made. Only I'm just really, really trying to push forward and get it made.
yeah,
So yeah. And it just has like all the gonzo stuff that suffuses life
yeah,
that I really wanted to put out there. It's just yeah,
yeah.
just
I I love a yeah, the Gonzo stuff because like you were talking earlier about the over success and like the or I don't know, I calling it over success. What do you
mhm.
actually call that? Like to success or like that's when you attract the attention of the
uh
gods? Like what do you actually call it in the game?
well, since the result bands that are taken from Apocalypse Keys, so 7 or less is a miss, 8 to 10 I call a glowing success, and then 11 or more is a burning success.
Burning success.
Yeah, or
So
you get more than you bargained for.
yeah,
Yeah.
you so like I imagine you took like the image that I had earlier right? Because I've read all the Conan books and so like it is
Hmm.
the original Howard stuff. I've got
Hmm.
like I've read all that. There's plenty more Conan out there that I haven't read yet by other people. Um, but I imagine like a big coiled serpent or something like that, and then you go to stab it and you get this like 11, and so like okay, great, you stabbed it, you did a bunch of damage, but this is like this serpent is bigger than you imagined and is now uncoiling endlessly and filling the room and like you are a fool for having trifled here,
It's
and it's
actually
like
the opposite. So there's always giant snakes. They always show up in this game.
sure.
I think it's sort of like table stakes, for sword and sorcery,
Yeah,
table
yeah, yeah.
snakes. But like what actually happened was somebody did a burning success. They were casting a spell on this snake, and they rolled a burning success. And instead of just slowing the snake down, they turned the whole snake to stone. And
Mm,
so the snake is hovering over the bridge they're on, and suddenly it's a gigantic thousands of pound statue and it crumbles apart like the Kraken at the end of Clash of the Titans, but it falls on them. So the consequences of their actions cause unforeseen difficulties.
Mm.
It breaks the bridge and then they're falling. So you do destroy this gigantic snake, but then this whole mess happens as a result.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that. It's a bit of a monkey's paw, like I was
Yeah,
saying,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to add my little thing there. Like
Oh,
Gonzo. When you
thank you.
said Gonzo, I had to
Yes.
share it. Like it just the yeah it yeah. And the example you gave is like yeah, of course you defeat it, but it like that is its own problem, I guess. In it,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it that feels very much like the stories and uh yeah. So
And in a way, it fits with OSR sensibility,
right,
like like to say, okay, we're going to take the brakes off, and it's
yeah,
just how out of control can this get?
yeah.
Yeah.
I I mean, we're definitely at our time. We should begin to move to wrap up. But I have one more idea that it's kind of percolating
Mhm.
there, and like I think your game, as you've described it, is sort of I think PBTA has been out there long enough that now there's like as the circle goes outward of like what can PBTA be? What can PBTA be? And it gets a little bigger. I think yours is the second game this year that I've encountered that has sort of like it's almost on the edge of like maybe it isn't even PBTA anymore because it's doing
Mhm.
such a different
Mhm.
thing or it's added these little other bits to it to make it to focus in on what that game wants to be obviously the central mechanic of rolling the two D6s and having a ranked system. I mean, if that's all it takes to be PBTA, then these games, yours and this other one that I is forthcoming, it has that, but it is I think it's maybe just a natural part of the system having had so much life for I don't know, decade and a half, almost 2 decades. I don't know how long it's
Oh
been around,
yeah,
that
yeah.
you've got these things where like, well, what does it look like when we mix it with OSR? What does it look like when we mix it
Mhm.
with, the more even more storytelling? Like, what if we put some more harder rules to like world creation, and then we have like a lot of game clocks involved of like
Mhm.
the world is getting darker or less dark and we're
Yeah,
fighting against that but that's happening at the same time as we're still rolling 2d6s and getting sixes or failure but there's other things that are happening other than the 2d6 or it's
yeah.
interacting in other ways. I think it's just a natural consequence but it's very I don't know, I'm excited for this game.
Thank
I'm
you.
excited for the other
Thanks
one that
very
is
much.
there because I think it's like the PBTA plus, I guess, is what
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
happening a lot right now, where these other like again, as it's visualizing it is, it's like a expanding bubble, right? It's meeting these other design spaces and mixing them together.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're on trend. You're on trend for what's happening right
Awesome,
now.
awesome. That's good. Glad to hear
Uh,
it.
all right. Well, we'll look forward to that next year, and maybe we'll be back. We'll do all the promotion we can for wedding games when this is out because I'm excited about
Yay.
this Defy the Gods, and we'll look for that for next year. But in the meantime, where can people find you if they want to maybe get is the beta still available? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
where's Hectic Electron? If they want to tweet at you their raccoon maps of their raccoon adventures,
Yes,
what where can any of that happen? Tell people where you can be found on the internet.
I am at so my website is hecticelectron.com. I am at Hectic Electron everywhere. Um, Twitter, Tumblr, Blue Sky. There's actually too many to keep track of, but
Hmm.
I keep track of as many as I can. You can get the beta for Defy the Gods at bit.ly/ Defy the Gods beta, separated by dashes, Defy dash the dash gods dash beta. And you can sign up for my newsletter, which is roughly biweekly, which just has a lot of this same enthusiasm and good vibes in it. And that is the Everlasting Never Ending Game Night. You can get there from bit.ly/ENGN. Um, and yeah, and you can just email me at uh, Chris at hecticelectron.com. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today to talk to me, and the enthusiasm that we've shared has been delightful. I usually ask people to write a comment in the comments, and I'm trying to think of like what heroic fantasy type character would you want to be, or whatever, get raccoon. Either one. Like do a poll, chaos
Yes.
or order. I don't know. I'm
I
sad.
love that. Yes.
Please
Yeah, I
comment in the
think all of
comments
those are good.
something. Again, Chris, thank you so much for being here. And thank you
Thank
to
you.
everyone who watched the video.